Letes sodales. So, let's talk about virtual assessment. And today, I picked this template because it reminded me of when I was a student, but it also reminded me of when I was a new teacher. And actually, it reminded me of all 22 years that I spent in physical school classrooms. We always had chalkboards. Now, ours were green. We had the updated kind. But there were whiteboards, and they were interactive whiteboards. They were different brands of those. But always the primary board space that I had for all 22 of the years that I taught was a chalkboard. And that chalkboard kind of sends a message. It sends a different message than a whiteboard sends, right? And it definitely sends a different message than what an interactive whiteboard sends. I also picked this because I just absolutely loved the picture that comes with it. I think sometimes we've all felt like that caterpillar, right? Caterpillar is going along. Caterpillar is suddenly a hungrier caterpillar than usual. Caterpillar sets out to eat the leaf, not even necessarily knowing why. Does the caterpillar know that soon it will go through a metamorphosis that it cannot imagine? Does it know that it will melt down into like goo and that then it will grow into something that has never been? Does it know that it's going to fly someday? I've never been a caterpillar, so I don't know, right? And it's so powerful to be able to say, I don't know. But it's a little bit scary, too. Because all of us have that old teacher story. And that old teacher story tells us a whole bunch of things. It tells us who we're supposed to be as a teacher, right? But it also tells us who we're not supposed to be. And it tells us what we're supposed to do. But that means it also tells us what we're not supposed to do. And it tells us about good teachers and their assessment practices, but that means it tells us something about bad teachers and their assessment practices too. And nobody wants to be a bad teacher, right? But sometimes when you're afraid of something, sometimes when you do everything in your power to avoid that scary something, sometimes you make a scary shadow. Have you made a scary shadow? I know I have. Did that scary shadow affect the way that you were or are as a teacher? I know mine did. Does it affect the way that you approach assessment and planning and interactions with your students? I bet it does, because I know mine did. So here's how shadows work, right? In physics, there's a light source, and then there's something between the light and you, and three different kinds of shadows. I love the fact that they have Latin names. The umbra, the full shadow, the antumbra, where it's starting to emerge from the shadow, and the penumbra, where it's partially in shadow. And of course, that's an eclipse. And somehow, I guess you're the person who's not on the earth watching something be eclipsed, but all the time as the earth is, or as any body is, celestial body is orbiting around any other body, there's always going to be a shadow. And just like in our daily lives, if there's a light source that's not directly overhead, there's going to be a shadow, right? So shadows aren't actually scary. But the metaphorical scary teacher shadows that we make, those can be kind of scary. Let me tell you about three of mine. And I think they're pretty common. The first scary shadow for me, I met him. Well, I met him, a few of him along the way, right? But my first year as a teacher, I actually met a guy who was good old Coach Worksheet. That was his nickname among the faculty. Imagine what the students called him. I never wanted to know what the students called him. Coach would give his students a worksheet. He would make them do the worksheet. He would give them a practice test, which was the worksheet. He would give them a test, which was the worksheet, and then he would yell at them for doing badly on the test. Coach also walked out of the building 5 minutes after the students did. I mean, okay, because he had to get to practice, right? And he never took any work home. And Coach never worried about anything. And if there was a day that you could take off, like an optional teacher work day, Coach was not going to be there. Coach was kind of a scary shadow for me because I thought good teachers are supposed to work really, really hard. I thought that good teachers are supposed to be there all the time. I thought we're supposed to give and give and give of ourselves even when we have nothing left. So Coach was kind of my scary shadow. Another scary shadow for me was, let's call them terrifying Dr. Admin. So Dr. A. And Dr. A is your scary principal. And back when I was a new teacher, Dr. A is coming around doing observations with a physical clipboard with the form on it because that was a long time ago. Today, of course, Dr. A has an iPad or a Chromebook or something like that, right? And is sitting there filling in an online form. But Dr. A is scary because as teachers, we're usually the ones doing the assessing. We don't like to be the ones who get assessed. We're afraid we're going to get a bad report, right? And that's going to end up in our permanent record somehow. And we're not quite sure what's going to happen. We just know it's bad, right? One of my colleagues at my last school, we had a new initiative. And the new initiative was that in addition to turning in lesson plans, we were actually going to get feedback on the lesson plans from our administrator. And to the credit of non-scary Dr. A, who actually was Dr. A, she sent us the rubric so that we would know what it was that we needed to do. I appreciated her for that. But my colleague, who was also a language teacher, spent all weekend. She said, I spent all weekend lesson planning. I hope I get a good report. Well, she got a pretty good report, but she was still crying. I mean, weeping level of crying and saying she got a bad report. The only comment was, I don't quite understand how the activities relate to the objective. The objective isn't very clear. To her credit, when my colleague got over her crying, she looked at it again. She'd say, oh, yeah, I actually wasn't very clear about my objective, was I? And she fixed it. And it got a lot better. She also spent a lot less time the next weekend planning lessons because she is a good teacher. She was a veteran teacher. She knew how to come up with a good goal and get her students there, but she just forgot about that under the pressure of terrifying Dr. Admin. And then the third common scary shadow is that one teacher who got fired for something. I don't know if that person actually exists or not. I mean, certainly teachers leave. Sometimes teachers get non-renewed. Sometimes they get fired for, like, an actual thing, right? But the scary shadow of that one teacher who got fired for something, that influences us in some really powerful ways. Because we don't want to be that one teacher who got fired for something, that bad teacher. We don't want to be the person who gets a bad report from terrifying Dr. A. And we kind of have a complicated relationship with good old Coach W, right? I mean, because in some ways it'd be kind of great to walk out of the building 5 minutes after the kids with nothing to do, but it kind of triggers some guilt. It kind of triggers some fear. It kind of turns into a scary shadow. Now, I don't know, obviously your story isn't mine. Your experiences aren't mine. But I bet you've had some scary shadows in your life. And I bet that even though situations and conditions have changed a lot, I bet those scary shadows might still be affecting your teaching practice. And they might still be affecting your assessment practice. But one thing that's kind of important, getting back to our friend the caterpillar, there's a thing that caterpillar does not know, right? That caterpillar does not know that all the eating and stuff is going to come to an end. The caterpillar does not know that It's going to form a cocoon. It does not know that it's going to emerge from that cocoon as something totally different. In fact, when it starts making the cocoon, if it has awareness, it's probably pretty terrified. It's terrified because the environment has changed. It's terrified because everything has changed. It doesn't know what the future will hold. Am I dying? Is it always going to be like this? Well, it's not going to always be like this, right? There's a bright future on the other side for that butterfly, that future butterfly. And there's a bright future on the other side of this for us as teachers and learners. So I want to encourage you and leave you guys with this thought today. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be that hard. And when it's overwhelming, what we need most of all is a sympathetic ear, maybe a shoulder to cry on, like my colleague that day with the bad report. And what we need is we need a supportive community that's going to help us look at those shadows, see that the shadows aren't so scary, and help us get to the other side and find the thing that works better for now. So I hope you guys have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend. Get in touch if you need anything. You know, I'm serious about that. And until we see each other the next time, Walete Sodales.